This is going to be part 2 of a talk I gave at the very beginning of startup school on evaluating startup ideas. And the thing to know about both of these talks is we've been talking about them from the point of view of the investor. Basically, it was helpful, I thought, to explain to founders how investors evaluate startup ideas and looking at that structure so that they can better understand their own ideas, opportunities, and then in this presentation, present them better to the people that they want to get excited. So a quick recap. In the first part, I basically say a startup idea is a hypothesis for why your company is going to grow really quickly. That hypothesis must compose of 3 different parts: the problem, the solution, and the insight. And the basic parts is your problem should be pretty big, pretty pervasive, have a lot of these characteristics to make it feel like there's a very big market, that a lot of people have the problem. The only thing you need to know about the solution is that you should not start with a technology. You should start with a problem. And lastly, you're looking to have something that's going to make your company unique and have some kind of unfair advantage that we call an insight that will show why your company will grow faster than other companies. I talked about 5 different types of unfair advantages that your company can have and kind of what are the benchmarks for meeting them. Now, the thing to keep in mind about understanding and creating this startup idea is that I don't need you to do all of the work, to lay all of that out in detail. That's stuff that you'll kind of want to know or keep in mind. But a really good investor will do that on their own. They'll hear what you're talking about and extrapolate. And so what I'm going to cover in this presentation is how do you package up that hypothesis? How do you take all the things that you understand about your company and your startup idea and how I present it to an investor so that they can make a decision that's in your favor? This is the YC startup application. And basically, this is the application, all the questions that we ask that YC partners will use to evaluate your startup. So down here, when you're filling out the YC application, we actually link to a couple of things, and one of them is how to apply successfully. I can't tell because I read so many applications, but it feels like founders are not reading that essay. It was written by Paul Graham in 2009, and almost everything in there still holds to this day, and people still make mistakes from it. So I'm just going to point out some stuff and really punch it in here while I have your attention. So here's a quote from that essay. Basically, we believe for every company that we will interview at YC, we bet there's probably another company that's just as good as them out there, but they messed up on the application and we didn't realize it. We didn't invite them. And basically, the reason is because they didn't express their idea clearly. That's it. You might think, oh, I didn't show off all that complex stuff about my startup idea, and that's why they didn't pick me. And I want you to know that's not true. And so the first thing I want you to keep in mind is I do not need you to sell me as a YC partner. Right? A good investor, so average investor, what they do is they talk to you when you tell them about your idea, and it feels like they're poking holes. All the questions they ask about, what's all the reasons why this could go wrong? A good investor does it the other way around. They hear what you say, and they imagine, and they use their optimism, and they use knowing that some kind of rare event has to happen for you to become a billion-dollar company, and they try to imagine all those rare events that could possibly happen to you. And then they pitch that path back to you. And so we are really good at selling ourselves. So you don't need to do that. And the thing is, you guys are kind of bad at selling things in the beginning, right? And what I need you to understand is that I'm trying to evaluate these 3 statements when I'm hearing your idea. Do I understand it? Am I excited by it? Do I like the team? And do I want to work with them? Surprise! In your weekly updates, when you do your group sessions, these are the questions that we ask you to ask one another. It's basically the questions that we're trying to figure out for ourselves, and we're hoping that every week when you talk with other companies, you are practicing getting feedback and understanding whether you're able to instill this in other people. So your goal is just to be clear. I will do everything else. So back to the application. These are the only two things we're going to focus on today. What do I put in the what's my company going to make? How do I describe my company in a very efficient manner? The first way to do this is to be clear. The reason we focus on this is because a clear idea is the foundation for growth. And what I mean by that is that the best companies in YC or around the world grow organically. They grow by word of mouth. What does word of mouth look like? It looks like this. It's basically, I talk about your company, what you're doing, making, etc., and I'm the most interesting person at the dinner table. And I tell it to other people, and those people want to tell other people. That's it. Word of mouth is something where I remember what you do, I talk about it enthusiastic, and it spreads on its own. Marketing and advertising, it's a tax I believe companies pay because they did not make something remarkable. Now, before anyone can remember at the dinner table what you do, they have to understand. And so I have very simple rules for how to make things easy to understand. This will sound familiar if you're familiar with an essay I wrote on how to design a better pitch deck. And I'm going to focus on basically saying that the way I talk about designing a pitch deck actually works for ideas and lots of other things. And so the way I make things easy to understand on a pitch deck or a slide is to make it legible, I make it simple, and I make it obvious. In today's presentation, we're just going to focus on making your idea legible, which is going to sound interesting, right? For clarity. Now, in my essay, I talked about how at demo day, when our startups are presenting to a room full of 1,000 investors, it's kind of an interesting audience. Number one, the audience is filled with really old people. They tend to not have very good eyesight as a result. They all can't sit in the front row, like you lovely people. Some of them have to sit in the way back and stand up. And that means if you create a legible slide, they have to be ones that even old people in the back row with bad eyesight can read. Now, how does that apply to a legible idea? Well, basically, you are designing a slide that democratizes the idea, right? And so people who are blind or people who are ignorant, you're basically designing something for everyone in the room, not just the ones in the first row. So a legible idea can be understood by people who know nothing about your business. That will make things very clear to the widest possible audience. Now, this is super important because you will talk about your company more than anything else. It is actually the thing that we are really great at Y Combinator. We have our companies constantly practice talking about their startup. Startup school curriculum is designed around helping you constantly practice talking about your startup. And this is because you are going to need a lot of people if you're going to become a billion-dollar company. So you are trying to find a co-founder, you have to have a way of talking about your company clearly. Whether you're getting users or investors or employees or shareholders, you have to get really good at this. And you have to be able to do it quickly and efficiently. Here are things to avoid that makes things not clear, that makes your idea muddy. The first is ambiguity, right? So that's like obviously the opposite of clear or straightforward. Something's a little abstract. Something could be interpreted in two ways, and therefore it might take a question to understand what you do. Complexity. So I have a very specific definition of complexity. And so if you look at the root word, simple and complex come from the same root and having to do with twists or braids. Things that are simple are ones that have one braid, and things that are complex have multiple braids. They're intertwined with one another. A simple idea is one idea that does not fold. A complex idea are ideas that are intertwined. So simplicity means you are not trying to mix a bunch of things in your description. Mystery. So this is an odd one, but what I mean is anything where it's like, I'm not going to understand what is going on when you're talking about your company. Jargon is one, obviously. Any words that I don't understand. Anything that's vague, like indefinite pronouns. So if you just use this, it, etc., and you don't describe what those nouns are. And then things that you just suggest but aren't explicit about. And then last is ignorable. And so what I mean by that is there is some language that we will just ignore. So in UX design, people will create a sort of blindness to things that they don't want to look at or they don't find to be of important value. So for example, ad blindness is a big one that people sort of understand. And the thing is, when you're talking about ideas, there's a way of using language that is also easily ignorable. Things that just won't stick in your head. Things like marketing speak. There's probably lots of stuff that you heard about that. MBA speak, weird kind of like puff yourself up talk that doesn't give any extra information. And then buzzwords. And so when you say certain types of words that as an investor I've heard over and over again, or I will equate with zero information or value, then I will ignore them. And the result is parts of your pitch will end up being not even heard by me, and therefore I will not remember them. What you want to do is be conversational. A great pitch is one where you can tell it to your mom and she gets it. She's proud of you, right? She's not going to shake her head. And that means it's got to be conversational. And that's really good for word of mouth because we talk in normal conversational speak. We don't talk like an MBA. We don't talk like CEOs all the time. So it's best to talk conversationally. Again, avoid jargon. Words that are only understood or used by your industry. No preamble. We'll have some examples of this. But if you want to be clear, let's go straight to what you want to talk about. Let's not have a winding path to eventually getting there. And the last one, this one's a big one, is being reproducible. So when I hear your idea, can I imagine it in my mind? Can I see what I would have to build to create your company? If I don't have that, then I have no picture in my head about what your company does. And until I have that picture, I can't ask any of the questions that helps me understand if I'm excited about you or understand other nuances of your business. To make things reproducible, I need to know nouns. I need to have objects that I'm going to imagine in my head. And there's 3 types of nouns that I should understand from your startup idea. The first one is, what are you making? That should be really clear. What is the problem? And then who is the customer? The 2 are kind of related to the market, right? But I should have these kind of 3 nouns in my head. So let's go through some examples. This says we are going to transform the relationship between individuals and information. This sucks. The thing is, we see this all the time. Number 1, all the nouns that you have seated on here are abstract. They're ideas. I can't reproduce based off of this. It has 0 informational value. I still have to ask questions to answer the 3 nouns that I need to have. This is a bad description for a company. We will see stuff that starts like this when we ask, describe what your company is going to make. I don't even want to read it, but basically, it starts talking about the story of the company, or basically it's like, in the beginning, there was this problem, and we're gonna go through this issue, right? And then there's these bad guys, and they showed up. But then who's gonna save us? We're finally here to save. And you're like, I have to read another 1,000 applications. That's not gonna work for me. This is the description on the actual application that Airbnb put to YC. Airbnb is the first online marketplace that lets travelers book rooms with locals instead of hotels. It's concise, it's descriptive, I understand what they're building, I have a sense for what they're making, and then I can start thinking about my other 2 ideas of whether I'm excited about it, and then am I gonna like this team? Here's Dropbox. Synchronizes files across your or your team's computers. The thing about this is it's refreshing, but also there's no pretense. They aren't playing defense. I see a lot of company descriptions where they're like, I'm worried about this, or I've gotten this kind of feedback. And so they give up clarity to make themselves look bigger and blow themselves up, or make themselves try to look more interesting. They're trying to protect themselves against something away ahead of time. And the whole problem is usually what it ends up doing is it brings me farther away from you, all that padding that you've put on yourself. Here's a description from a company in the current batch. Lumini is building X-ray vision for soldiers and first responders. We don't have to go deep into the details. I don't need to understand how they exactly do this, etc. This creates a foundation for my curiosity. Now I will start from here to try to figure out, oh, how do you do this? Is this the right team to do this? How far along are they? Do they have traction? Do they have customers? I start going down the route of asking all the right questions based off this one description. This is a good one. Here's another one. So Vahan, in the current batch, is building LinkedIn for the next 1 billion internet users. So doesn't perfectly connect me to what they're sort of making, but I'm intrigued. I'm excited about someone building into LinkedIn, and I know it's some kind of social network for business people. And so now I'm curious about how. I don't need you to answer how in the description, but I understand what you're doing. And then now I can start making questions in my head about like, how would I evaluate whether this is working or successful or promising or not? Or is this the right team? Do they have a certain amount of traction, etc.? It gets me on the right track. Now, the reason I've used this example is because we have a lot of companies who try to use the X for Y. And what I mean by that is like LinkedIn for whatever, or Uber for blank, or Airbnb for blank. And so that X for Y is super useful because it allows you to shortcut business model and some kind of complex behavior, right? And then attach it to some other vertical or something that you're trying to make work. X or Y is okay, but most people abuse it or do it incorrectly. So I'm gonna give you some tips. First, should you use X for Y? Sorry for the legibility. Number one, is X a household name? This should be like $1 billion company, right? You can't use your uncle's like pet shoe store as the X for this because people don't know your uncle's pet shoe store and they don't know if it's successful or not, right? So everyone, as many people should know about this as possible, and for an investor, it should be clear that it's $1 billion company or opportunity. Everyone has to agree that it is successful. So you could have a really big X, everyone knows about it, but it's infamous, right? So that people don't think it's successful. So be careful of that. Does Y want X? So is it really clear why the target that you're going after wants this kind of model applied to it, this kind of solution applied to it, whether it's Airbnb for or Airbnb or Uber for, etc. It should be really clear that that's a segment that's either missing it, is not being served well by the other one, and also that those people want to have that kind of model. And then the third one is why should be a huge market. So if you're building X for Y, and then the last part doesn't sound like a really big business, that's not gonna work well for you, right? Because what we want, because you're essentially saying that you are something, but it's a subset. And what we want to make sure is that subset feels like it could be really, really big. If you choose a subset that sounds like it's going to be really, really small, investors won't be as interested. It means that I'm worried that you will not have enough potential headroom to grow to become a $1 billion company. So here's an example that doesn't work. So we had a company in the batch that started off by describing themselves as Buffer for Snapchat. Buffer is a nice company, but definitely smaller than Snapchat. So don't want to do that. All right, so basic summary for this section. Lead with what, not why or how. You don't need all that other stuff. That stuff gets in the way of your clarity for the most part. I'll read like 1,000 applications every single batch, and it's a really hard thing to do. Basically, even though it's my job, it's really, really difficult to have that much focus and attention across all these different applications. So I need some empathy. I need you to help me out. And what we want is that when I bring up your application and I'm looking at it, let's make our intimate time really pleasurable, right? Let's make the time that I spend on an idea very efficient. I'll look at it, I'll understand really clearly, I'll move around your application and be like, oh, I'm kind of excited, maybe there's gonna have this. And I'll look at that part and I'm like, oh, they do have it, that sounds awesome. Oh, what about this? Oh, that sounds awesome too. What we don't want is me to go like, oh, I don't know what are they talking about? Then I have to like go to your website, I'm like, don't know what they're talking about. I don't know how this sort of works. I go back to it. I try to figure something else out. I try to see if like some other partner might understand what you're doing, etc. Super inefficient. Where is there going to be room for me to get excited as a result? So to be efficient, we need to be concise. Concise. The best way, I want to keep this in mind, is to use some examples. And so here's some things I need you to keep in mind. Yes, I want you to be concise, use as few words as possible. And what I want you to understand is the concision is actually gives me secondary information about you as a team. It lets me, one, know that you have thought deeply about your idea. Because you've thought so deeply about it, and because you've practiced talking about it so much, and you've gotten really good at getting people excited and understanding your thing really quickly, you probably have figured out how to do it in a short amount of time. So it lets me know that this is a founder that has thought deeply about the idea. The other thing about being concise, it shows me that you are efficient. And if you're efficient with your words, then you're probably efficient with your thoughts. And that means you're probably also efficient with your actions. And what that means is that I will start to believe that you understand what is most important about your business, you understand how to communicate it clearly, and you might actually know how to always figure out the most important part of what to do about your company, to make it grow, to make it work, etc. So there's some minimum stuff that we want to have, even though we're trying to be as concise as possible. Again, I want to understand the nouns. So if we're so concise that I can't understand these, then your concision is too much. The other is, I want to get to this point when I read the concision or this short version of whatever it is you're talking about. Because again, I know there's like 100,000 reasons why your company is great, but when I'm reading your application, I'm only going to maybe remember 2 to 3 of them. And so we have to try to make sure those most important ones come up to the top. This is a real startup school company description. It's an online e-commerce store. I can picture what it is, but again, it's not a description that helps me get excited about it. It doesn't help me lead to all the other things. I have to do now more work to understand why this is fast growing and its potential. I also don't know, based on this, some nouns. I don't know exactly who the customer is. Is it people that they're selling stuff to, or are they making an e-commerce store for other shop owners? Just ambiguity. IT security services. This is most of the descriptions that we see on Startup School. It makes it really, really hard for us to understand it. A meritocratic decision support system. The thing is, I want to know for what? For whom? I don't even understand what the problem is that they're solving based off of this. And so, is it because a lot of people have non-merit? Basically, I have to ask so many questions in my head to figure out why did they get to this sort of description. Learn and sharing knowledge about data science and artificial intelligence. Sounds more like a mission. I can't tell what the product is and how they're sort of going to go about it. Like, I couldn't reproduce this. If I had 10 companies build based off this description, you'd have 10 very different products. The other thing that's odd about company descriptions is you guys tend to capitalize and make proper nouns very weird words and phrases. You should not do that. It's not like a magazine title. And it makes me think sometimes you're emphasizing the wrong things. Like, you're thinking the data science and artificial intelligence is the thing that's going to make me excited. And the thing is, like, those are the buzzwords. Those are the solutions. And it makes me worried that you haven't started with a problem. Let's go to an example of like how to adjust a description. So here's a much longer one. So our company will make low cost and low power consumption medical devices based on artificial intelligence and IoT suitable for sub-Saharan communities. Now, relatively clear. I can understand it reading it, but it's not the most concise form of this, and I feel like there's a lot of things get in the way. And so when I work with companies to help shrink and reduce and improve their descriptions so that I will get the most out of it, I want to talk through the process. The first thing I want to do is just figure out what are the nouns in the description. Here we go. Our company, medical devices for sub-Saharan communities. Oh shit, we're almost done. Right? Everything else that gets added on here, whatever verb, adjectives or adverbs you want to be really careful. You want to know, like, is it giving maximum punch for this, right? And so really the verb is going to be usually just you're making something, etc. But usually it's going to be whatever the product. Like the verb is like the thing that we're making. If we're thinking about this in an active voice structure, the subject, the verb, and then the object, the customer, the market, the people we're going after. Everything else, if we add anything back to this, I really want to be really careful about why we're going to add back to it. Is that going to be the stuff that makes me excited? So the artificial intelligence and IoT suitable stuff, that's like how they're wanting to implement the technology, and I'm more worried that they're wanting to use buzzwords to describe it, right? Hopefully that's like a secret weapon that you have, but I bet it's not the defining characteristics of whether this company is successful or not. And then up here, I see two modifiers for medical devices: low cost, low power consumption. So low cost, I can definitely see. That's super interesting. If you make a low cost device in sub-Saharan community, then I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That's really interesting, because that's like, it's hard just to make something, you know, for developing countries, but to make it so that it's actually affordable for them, that'd be interesting. The low power consumption, I can give or take there. I'd have to know more about the company to know whether that's actually crucial to understanding whether this company has an unfair advantage or not. So if I was to redo this, it would come out to, we create affordable medical devices for sub-Saharan Africa. Some people are going to be very squeamish about this. A lot of founders are worried. It's like, you're putting me in a box, man. It's too reductive. My business is complex. I do a lot of things, and a lot of things make me great. I want to tell you all of them. And the thing is, like, you don't have time. And I know it. As an investor, there's no investor that thinks any business is like simple and easy. I just don't think that from the default. So you shouldn't be worried that I'm going to think something small of it. And again, you want to be careful of the defense on here. Once I get to this, then I'll start asking the other questions. It creates that foundation for curiosity. All right, we're pretty much here at the end. The best way to help me, and I would love for you to help me, is to be clear and concise. Thank you very much. All right, so we'll do a couple of questions about this presentation, and then I'll have Adora join me, and then we'll answer questions about anything. Right here.
Thanks for the presentation, Kevin. You talked a lot about what is presenting an application, but you also hear a lot of pitches, especially in demo day. And what, in your opinion, are the killer tips to make a great pitch and get people to like you in a demo day?
So he's asking about, like, I talked a lot about here about writing an idea for the application. How that might be different for companies who are pitching or presenting to investors on like a demo day. What are things that we look for? And so I talk about in that essay that I wrote how to pitch, how to design a pitch deck, and talk about like how to present the ideas. The main thing to keep in mind is that so let me describe the situation. So demo day at Y Combinator, it's like 1,000 people in the room, and you have 2 minutes to talk about your company and show what you've built to get them excited, and then there's going to be 200 other companies that will do the same thing on the stage. It's an extremely hard problem. And so in 2 minutes, what do you get across? How do we get it so that in 2 minutes, a company, on average, will then raise $1.5 million after demo day? And the thing to keep in mind is that, yes, there's 100 reasons why your company is great. You cannot say all of them in 2 minutes. You can't say them in a short conversation when you're meeting a bunch of investors inside of the room. There's like maybe 5 to 6 points that are really, really great about your company. Maybe the investor will remember 1 or 2 of them. One of them has to be remembering what you do. And so the goal of you being on stage is not to say all the things that's great about your company. It's to get people to want to have a conversation with you. To say, like, I can't ignore having a conversation with that person. That's what a great pitch does. And what that means is you don't make the slides be the thing that they remember. You want to make yourself. It's about your presence, the way you talk, how confident you are, etc. basically, do you present yourself in a way that people go, I want to interact with you? And so the presentation is more about making the founders look formidable and impressive, to use a language that everyone understands and is clear, but feels inevitable. And so the goal is not to do all this fancy stuff, it's to do very simple fundamentals and talk about them in a way so that everyone will understand. Right there.
I've applied a couple times, and the one question that's always the bane of my existence is what's the surprising or amusing thing that you've noticed about the world? Could you provide some clarity in terms of what you're looking for there? Is it something about the business, or is it like something witty? Like I spend like way too much time on that question.
So we have a question on the application to YC that is about explain what you.
Yeah, it's like what's something surprising or amusing that you like?
Yeah. So share something surprising or amusing that you've noticed about the world. And he's saying, I'm having a hard time with the question. And so any tips about that? So again, we at YC, we don't really judge ideas. I talked a lot about how to present your idea, but the idea is a reflection of how you think. So everything that we have in the application is to try to understand more about the team and the people who are behind the company. So a question like that is very obvious. It lets us know, how do you think about stuff? What do you find interesting or amusing? Because part of it is that YC is optimized to spend time with lots of people every single week for dinner. And I want to spend time with people I like, people who are not assholes, and are kind of interesting, right? And so that kind of question, it's basically a dating question. Just letting me know, like, oh, I want to buy this guy dinner. Right here.
In my example, it's a very specific financial problem that I'm trying to attack. So should I work on trying to make that very complex and very specific problem something that anyone understands? Or should I talk to the right people that understand that type of problem?
Gotcha. So the question is, he's working on a very complex fintech solution or app, and he's wondering, it's like, how do I balance this talking to the right people so I can use jargon and who understand the complexity versus making a version of the idea that everybody can sort of understand? The answer is, you have to do both. Yeah? So everyone that you're talking to in industry, your users, customers, or your business partners, you get a shortcut with them. And that's most of the people you're going to interact with. And the thing to know about that is you need to have that developed, right? That customer business partner speech so that you're efficient in talking with them. The thing is you also have this other one. If you're interested in outside investment, having the press want to talk about you, etc. You need to have a good storytelling narrative for non-experts. So really it is not one or the other, it is how you have to do both. And the thing is for fintech people, because there's so much around all these other people who just understand this stuff, they rarely practice this other thing because they just assume it's always going to be like that. But when they come to YC, it's the first time they want money from investors who might not know about their space, or they want to talk to press who's not going to understand what they're doing, etc. Right here, sitting down.
How do the best, most memorable applications make you feel?
So how do the best, most memorable applications make me feel? Probably the best ones make me go like, fuck, I want to join their company. That's like the best ones, right? It's like, man, these guys seem really cool. They're super smart. I feel like I'll learn a lot of stuff from them. Man, how do I get on their bandwagon, right? Like I'm thinking about quitting YCs. So that would be like the best ones possible. In the second tier, it's really just like I'm energized. Because when I'm reading tons of applications, I just don't understand what's going on, or I feel like people wasted a lot of time on the wrong stuff. I'm just getting frustrated. Like when I hit an application where all of a sudden it goes like, oh, it's a breath of fresh air, and I want to spend time with them. I want to ask them a bunch of questions. I get very curious, and then I want to jump around the room. I'm a very active guy, so I think if Adora got excited, she'd drink a glass of water, something like that. But really the best ones are the ones that it makes us wish we had done the company or that we would join them. That's the best. Right here.
The why or the how are very important for the idea. How can you include them?
How can I what?
Include them.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I talk a lot about focusing on the what and then kind of avoid the how and the why, but they might be really important. How do I include them? You will not include them in the description. They will be included elsewhere. So there's questions on the application that ask you about how are you going to get your users, what is an insight that you understand about the business no one else does, how you came across this, etc. So there's opportunities elsewhere. One thing to keep in mind is I would highly recommend trying to keep your answers within 1 to 2 paragraphs at the most. That makes it for an application that's very skimmable by me. So the whole thing is the how and why is important, but you can't just say it all at once. Like sometimes you've talked to someone and they're telling you a story, but they're trying to tell everything about everything all at once, and it feels like it's not giving you time to breathe or think. You want to sort of avoid that context. Right over there. Enthusiastic curly hair.
How do you know a company is on the right track on getting product market fit?
How? That sounds like a together question, but I'll answer it. So how do you know if a company's on the right path to product market fit? So if you have to ask a question, do I have product market fit? The answer is probably no, you probably don't, right? But if you're so busy and you're frightened that the company is going to fall apart because you have so many customers coming and asking stuff for you, and you're just figuring out, how do I hire? How do I serve everyone that wants to come to me? You're too busy to ask that question because you're just making money hand over fist. That's product market fit. You're on the right path. The whole thing is it feels like something else changing the company. It feels like you're out of control. So if you are in control of your company, you feel like you can relax and you're sleeping well, you're not on the right track. Very few companies ever experience this. Far back.
Okay. Well, this is just if you can talk about your experience doing this, because right now you're on the other side of the story, so you can go back to when you were applying to Y Combinator and presenting this and making this exciting.
So I'll tell a small anecdote about when I applied to YC and about how this sort of applies. When I applied to Y Combinator, I was really bad at describing what our company does. So we actually had pitched 2 different ideas. They told us to prepare for both, and when we got into the interview, one of the ideas they immediately said, not interested, and the other idea, we ended up pivoting in the middle of the interview. And so the way I had described the company in the beginning was I said, we are building a content management system that has a concept called reversible forms that allows you to both put data input in from the back end and also collect data from users on the front end. That's a horrible description of the company. And part of that idea that fed that is I wanted to be a content management system, because what was hot at the time, what was buzz, was movable type and WordPress. We wanted to build software like that, and we wanted to build a new version of this. And then I added not even normal jargon, I made up jargon that I put into my description, and I pitched it. And Paul Graham was just like, I don't know what you're talking about. But he was like, I think you're building a form builder. And then we were like, no. We looked at everyone in that space. They suck. They're really bad. We don't like what they're making. We don't want to be there. Not realizing that was the opportunity. Everyone was really bad there, but there are businesses that still succeeded. And so that's the clear example of this from the other side. And so I actually spend a lot of time, Adora and I spend a lot of time fixing mentally in our heads what you guys are making or doing. And so actually, after we're reading applications, a lot of times partners have to basically re-describe and re-pitch back what you're making, so that way they can understand why they're going to get excited. I'm going to do one more question, and then we're going to do combo. Right here.
Hello. So how do you tell an idea that has multiple stages? For instance, if you want to become Z, but before that you need to do X and Y.
So how do you tell and describe an idea that has multiple stages? You have to do part 1 before you can do part 2 and 3. I would focus only on describing what part 1 is. And then later on, you talk about what are the other phases that are important. Now, oftentimes, when I hear something like that, a YC partner will immediately have like an alarm go in their head, and they really are going to push you on, why do we really have to do part 1? I'm going to push so hard on why can't we go straight to part 3? Because what you're basically saying is like, it sounds almost like a defense instead of you saying a strategy. It sounds like it's like, hey, I'm going to talk about what my company's doing, but I'm worried that you're going to think it's really small. So don't worry, we're going to do parts 2 and 3. They're going to be even bigger. And the thing is, that's a really weak pitch. Doesn't sound very confident, etc. Now, what you want to avoid is saying like, we're doing what you could do is like, we're doing number 3 and we're starting with number 1. But that has to be very efficient. That number 3 is very quickly can be said, and that number 1 makes it sense. So it's like, I want to build automated marketing. I just met a Colombian company today, and they want to make automated marketing software for WhatsApp for small, medium businesses. And they're starting with hair salons, right? And then they're going to move on to all the other industries that need help with that. All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to invite Dora to come on.